There is quite a strange cocktail of inspiration behind my work. When I first started studying art at school, Art Nouveau was something I was very interested in. I remember studying the Tiffany lamps and particularly Musha, how he drew ladies with the flowing hair and how beautiful and inspired by nature they were. When I'm actually working on pieces, the drawing of the hair is one of my favourite parts. And then I'm also very interested in science, so I did want to be a scientist at one point. So with the entomology and the dissection of insects that I do with the clay, you can sort of see little references to that. I use Marie Antoinette's body quite a lot for the statues because she's always wearing really nice decorative things, lots of bows and ribbons. So sometimes if I really need a face, I use my face, so my face crops up in a lot of the dishes. But they are very different. You can tell the difference between those and the actual statues. It's just something about the look. Maybe the statues on the bus that you find, they're quite haughty with their features, and that's another thing that appeals to me. Because they're static, I like to think of what they might be thinking, what kind of life they might have had, because they're all based on real people. And I think I can fit those kind of characters into a narrative or a story a little bit more easy than actual people. I've always been interested in National Trust properties because you get such random collections there. I always remember the taxidermy collections when I was a child at Cork Abbey. Statues and kind of characters, I go on research missions. Same with the animals that I use in the dishes as well. They're all taxidermy specimens, nothing really comes from actual nature or anything I've seen. So maybe it's a question of trying to give them a life, assign them a narrative and make up a story for them. I use a white earthenware clay because it's fairly low firing and you can get quite vivid colours. Sort of suits my needs because I use lots of different processes. The dishes, they're sort of like collages, layering up slips, underglazes and then sgraffitoing through those. It's almost sgraffito and a little bit extra because sgraffito is just scratching through layers of clay, normally coloured slips, but it's more like carving the process I use. It's so much more than a drawing, you know, when you're working with pen and paper. Lines are beautiful, but with clay, you're actually making a 3D line. It's got depth and a weight like nothing you've seen before, so I love that part. The insects are a little bit different. We make the models first, and I make those out of Sculpey. The next part was to make the moulds from the models. It's called press moulding, so you press the clay into the model and then trim them up. So it's a little bit like dissection, that part. So I'm cutting up wings, cutting up legs and arms, and then putting the insects back together. It's quite playful, that bit. And so a lot of the butterflies were breaking in half, so we started gluing them back together on stag beetles or scarab beetles to make these more magical specimens. So they had maybe 6 pairs of wings and extra antlers and things. I tried to make my work very dreamlike and kind of quite ambiguous, so I'm asking the viewer to actually do a lot of the hard work to try and dream up what might be happening. I kind of want people to assign their own narratives, to kind of go back to that stage where making up an imagination was a really good thing. I think that's something that we've lost nowadays. So I'm kind of hoping that my work can be a meditative point for that. When you use insects or things like that in your work, there are going to be a portion of people that really dislike them. But then I see my mission is to see if I can actually get them to appreciate them like I do. Insects, actually, when they're alive and moving, I'm not really that keen on them, but actually it's the beauty of them, to see them in collections, to look how different they are and the sort of diversity of nature. I think everyone can appreciate that. I started working on the swarm after winning a solo show at Nottingham Castle, and that was back in 2011. I had a whole year to produce a body of work for a staircase. After the first visit, it sort of became quite apparent that it was an amazing chance for some kind of installation. To get some inspiration, I always go to a museum or a stately home. That's kind of my place to go when I'm feeling a bit lost. So I went to Woollerton Hall, had a tour of the closed rooms, which was really amazing. It was about 3:30 sort of in the winter, and I was in the entomology room and the light was sort of dancing through the windows and it made the insects in the collections look like they were moving. At that moment it just sort of struck me with this idea, what would happen if all of these insects somehow magically came back to life and became this swarm which travelled around infesting places. That's what we decided to make for this solo show, so I had to work with some helpers. We made 10,000 in the end and it took a whole year to make. It was a seed of an idea, a small narrative, which actually became quite a big story and keeps evolving each place that the swarm goes to now. So we can adapt to new venues and actually make new narratives for each place they visit, which is a really nice element of the work.